Right, we'll move on to the next speaker, William Izod of Pensana, who's going to talk to us about establishing the world's first independent and sustainable rare earth processing hub in the Humber Freeport.
That sounds about right. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me here. It's amazing, as everybody said, to be here and representing Pensana, talking about everything that we've talked about this morning, but another element on the periodic table. So yeah, I think that there's this case for developing supply chains. I think supply chain transparency, supply chain resilience is on everyone's agenda now, right from governments to businesses, and all the sectors that driving this green energy revolution. And I think that there's some incredibly valid points around getting what we can from the country that we live in and making those supply chains as small as possible, particularly from carbon benefit, particularly from security benefit. And then where we look to materials which we don't have, and that's where businesses such as Pensana come in, how do we capitalize on that midstream? We've got incredible exposure to excellent chemists within this country and a long history of chemical engineering. So let's capitalize on that, some of the research that we've got, and optimize that midstream processing so it's not just shipped to China once we mine it out the ground. That's incredibly important, equally important in securing supply chains. So what does Pensana do? Let's just wrap into some of the things that we get involved in. We're rare earths, and for the people that don't know what they are, they're a list of elements across the right at the bottom of the periodic table, including things such as neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, terbium, scandium, and this kind of group of materials. They go into predominantly a number of things, but let's talk about the high-value items, which is the high-power magnets that goes into EVs and wind turbines. That's the growth industry for us, and it's incredibly important. When we look at this EV and offshore demand, it's going to absolutely, explode, particularly for rare earths. We've already talked about lithium. We've seen the charts before. And just to kind of dimension that, if I look at the 40 gigawatts of electricity that will generate from offshore wind, that Boris Johnson likes to say that will become the Saudi Arabia of wind, well, that 40 gigawatts represents, if we're talking about 14 megawatt installations containing 6 tons of magnets per wind turbine, that's about 5 times our annual supply. So the entire factory that we'll produce, which incidentally is about 5% of the 2025 predicted volume, will be consumed by just wind turbines, not excluding EVs, excluding every other country in the world, just by the UK. So this is an incredibly important business, and security is definitely there. It's been presented before, transparency and security. So China currently produces 95% of the world's magnets. That's not the mined material, that's the processing. That's the processing of the separation, that's the processing of making it into magnets, and they control this. And that's obviously direct concern to the UK government, the US government equally, but also the automotives themselves. From January this year, I've been approached by all of the major automotives looking directly to source material. That's outside of their normal scope. Normally they'd buy a motor, but to be asked directly, essentially a mining company, to secure material directly from us, that's a change in the world dynamics. And that's been happening in lithium for a while. In addition, China has outright said that they don't need to be the supplier for the rest of the world. So their demand will far outstrip anyone else's with $11 trillion investment into their own renewable industry. They'll consume their entire demand by 2026. So what happens to the rest of the world, which 96% of the magnets produced are in China? That's our business case. Let's do something different. Let's supply the world with something, a resource outside. So why the Humber Freeport? Well, I've already touched on a couple of points. One is that it's the chemical engineering expertise within the region. And that goes for the northeast. We've got an existing oil and gas infrastructure, excellent chemical engineering, and that's the kind of processes or the kind of people that we want to retrain into rare earths and form an expertise, a centralized hub for processing rare earth materials, not from just from our own Longonjo mine, but from other sources as well. This will be produce about 4,500 tons of NdPr oxide per annum and a total rare earth oxide of about 12,500 tons. And establishing this will probably be about 120 to 150 full-time experienced jobs. That's chemical engineers, engineering, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and the ongoing effect of the encouragement investment in the area of the 4 times multiplier. It's also important to mention that there is things that the government is doing to encourage investment, and we are benefiting from them. We work very hard with the Associated British Ports to develop that bid for the Humber Freeport status. And this gives us direct benefits which are reported today as, you know, in terms of duty relief on taxes, lower national insurance for employees, but also awaiting clearance but customs zone. So we already talked about this import and export from the northeast, and this is going to continue. So access to duty-free import of raw material from Angola, for example, and then export for subsequent processing in the first instance, most likely Japan, but hopefully as we bring that supply chain shorter, we'll be producing it either in the UK or in Europe when we start talking about magnet materials themselves. This is a really important part of the investment criteria, and I think just to push that a bit further, in terms of making these investment decisions, the UK has an opportunity. We heard from Equinor earlier this morning, producing, I think it's a total of 4 or 5 gigawatts of energy into this northeast region. And that's important because that offers you access to low carbon energy. And that's a differentiator. So the automotive customers are not just looking for security of supply, they want the lowest embedded carbon in their products. So when they report on this, there'll be a carbon tax credit scheme that will be introduced, and they can actually report on this and say that they are operating in the lowest carbon. So what are we doing at Pensana? We're identifying the major sources. There's, in fact, just across the road, Yorkshire Energy Park has 50 megawatts of battery storage supplied by solar and wind. And getting private wire access to that is going to be essential to secure that supply. And that generates a really low carbon product. And that means that when we have this separation facility, providing high value rare earth oxides that will soon take to the magnet stage in our phase 2 of our process, we're designing specifically on the front end to be able to take material from anywhere. So really focusing on this midstream processing, making the UK one of the world's most efficient and green rare earth processing places in the world, and taking material from all over. But from the first instance, we'll look at using our state-of-the-art Longongjo mine in Angola. Now, Angola sometimes has a bad impression with people in the UK, but actually it's an incredibly investment-driven place. It's totally transformed itself over the last years, and the Moody Index has improved incredibly. Not only that, it probably has better infrastructure than some areas of Western Australia, probably a better legal system, amongst others. And we're about 3 kilometers away from a recently renovated $2 billion Benguela railway line, which is from the ex-copper belt from the mining engineers, but essentially runs directly to Lobito port, and then we can bring in the concentrated material into the UK. It's important to note that we're not just smashing the material up. This is a high-grade, highly weathered deposit, which is easy to dig. Mining is probably less than 1% of what we do. And then we do a multiple chemistry, as essentially we're a chemical industry, which we do separation and cracking of the material in Longongjo before we do the final separation in the Humber. And that's because this refined rare earths are all very, very similar to each other. And that skill of that separation process requires that kind of technical expertise that we have in the UK. Just to put a bit of a picture on it, this is the new port at Lobito. It's absolutely state-of-the-art, and it's recently decreased its waiting times by about 2 months. There's incredible investment going on in Angola itself, and we recently hosted the trade mission there with the likes of Rio Tinto and Anglo-American, who are looking to reinvest in Angola as their primary source. It's going to be a great investment time for both Angola, but also for the Northeast. I think that the amount of things which are going on in the Northeast in particular, and these little collaborations which I see appearing between us and Equinor, for example, or other partners who are developing in the Northeast, really makes it attracting to do investment. But for us, it's for any business, it only works when you're being driven by an exceedingly experienced management team. And the faces I put on here is this slide that we pulled together because just reflecting on the people that are involved in this project show that distance of success. So if I start with our chairman, who has a massive amount of experience in the mining industry, not just from developing projects, but also financing them. Tim George has delivered projects, mining projects in Angola, so has massive amounts of experience across Africa. And then Rocky Smith, who is one of the world's leading experts on rare earth materials and ran the Mountain Pass mine for many years. And he's an excellent person to have on the team. Rob Kaplan, in terms of our financing, he's been instrumental, and particularly looking around the Angolan investment side. And then our three non-executives who have brought so much experience to the team. Jeremy Beaton, who ran the London 2012 Olympic Games and famously tells us that he did it on time and under budget. And then Baroness Lawthover, who brings a sense of accountability to the team. She was envoy to Angola and Africa for many years and brings a certain experience and delivers that. And then Steve Sharp, who certainly in the investment community delivered over $6 billion worth of financing over the previous few years. So he's an incredibly experienced investment. I think that kind of really, I know it's short, but simply gives you an overview of where investment does work in the UK. I think it gives an example of where a lot of the government's initiatives, levelling up, Freeport, actually does work. It delivers a lot of this success, and we think we'll benefit from a lot of it. But also, I think that midstream, delivering that midstream and the chemical processing is where we deliver a lot of value to the UK in particular. And that is me.
Thank you very much. Have we got any questions for William? Here we go.
Simon Hargreaves from Halitech. Can you just sort of explain to me a little bit about, you said it was going to be 12,500 tonnes output from the site. How much are you actually bringing in from Angola, and are you actually using any sort of products from the UK as to in the processing of that as well?
Yeah, of course. So there's about 45,000 tonnes worth of mixed rare earth sulfate being brought into the UK, being processed into the 12,500 tonnes of initial products. There's an additional cerium hydroxide component, which is about 8,000 tonnes on top of that. So 20,000 tonnes delivery. The rare earth component to our incoming feedstock is about 50%. And in terms of material consumption, we've got a list of reagents which we need for the chemical process. So there'll be a mixture of kerosene, hydrochloric acid, caustic soda, various flocculants, etc., for the chemical processing itself, which will be a mixture from the UK, but also Germany